If I was the Prime Minister, I would have rebuilt the Babri Masjid brick by brick till such time that the Supreme Court adjudicated on it.
When Mr. Nehru's economic policies failed and they called it the Hindu rate of growth.
Why should one keep on blaming the Congress government for the last 9 years? I mean, they're not in power. You know, one would be a coward if one doesn't blame without malice or is not critical about the people who are in power who have the ability to change.
We put the word secularism in the 70s, 77. Were we not secular before that? We are secular by nature because Hindus are secular. India is secular because Hindus are secular. It is not the other way around.
Akbar had a very particular rule that if a woman or a girl walks into the public without the veil, she will be made into a prostitute. And we shower a lot of praises to Akbar.
We can settle 40 to 50,000 Rohingya Muslims in Kashmir and rest of India. And we have not been able to settle 7 lakh of our own people. We have been a banana republic ever since we became a republic. The Hindus can't even approach the court to say, my lord, can you please at least give us back the demolished temple? How is this a democracy? I'm sorry, it's not.
Welcome to the Nation's Creed. Today, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, Rahul Shivshankar and Avas Maldiyar come together to share their bold and unfiltered insights on key issues shaping India's present and future. Don't miss this engaging and thought-provoking discussion. If you find this discussion insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Do not forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so share your views in the comments below.
It's lovely to be here and so nice to see a full house of young curious minds, and I hope you get to read my book as well as Dr. Ranganathan's book. It's obviously a bestseller and it has been on the big charts, as he himself sort of tells us. Look, my book is an interrogation really of the left's position. I'll be very honest, I come from a family where, let me just put it this way, they had a sort of, they had a monopoly on leftist thought. My aunt is Romila Thapar and my uncle is Karan Thapar, and both of them have been very public figures.
I had no idea. Razia किन मुंडों में फंस गई.
So they had a monopoly over a conversation which went on quite long, and I found that a lot of what they were saying and speaking about went unchallenged, but was full of sort of intellectual loopholes that needed to be interrogated. And the opportunity has presented itself because Mr. Modi, of course, came to power in 2014, and then you saw the backlash. Anything that he ever has done has been resisted, and most often on ideological lines. Even though I find that his 9 years in power, as Dr. Ranganathan himself perhaps has put forth, has steered really clear of some of the foundational ideological issues that should have actually defined Bharat. He's only addressed a few of those issues, but I suppose you can give the man some time. Fundamentally, what were they saying? The 2019 election has seen the birth of an angry state, that after 2019, a large number of changes have been made which have changed the citizens' relationship with what was a grand secular constitution that we gifted to ourselves under Mr. Nehru, and that we were now headed towards this angry parochial Hindu Rashtra, and some have of course gone to the extent of describing it as the coming of a Hindu Pakistan, and that is the very eloquent voice on the left, Mr. Shashi Tharoor. He's come up with this phrase and he often sort of talks about it, and therefore you've had a whole stream of people sort of pushing this very, I suppose one can only say, an extremely dark view of where we are headed. Because obviously, if you become a Hindu Rajya and become a Hindu Pakistan, then you know what happens to minorities. And therefore, it is an exclusivist concept. And they said 2024 is the last chance to stop Modi from creating the architecture of a Hindu Rajya. And today, in a couple of days, when we are going to have the Pran Pratishtha at the Ayodhya Ram Temple, this conversation is speaking again that look, this is the physical manifestation of a Hindu Rajya where the Prime Minister is going to be the plenipotentiary, so to speak, and he is going to be the person who is going to take India away from its secular roots and merge religion with politics, and that also the Hindu religion with politics in a way that never has happened before. Of course, we've never really been a secular country. Unfortunately, this is a lie, and I have brought it out in this book where I talk about it, come up with a phrase, it's called discriminatory secularism. We were only secularism in name, and Dr. Ranganathan will of course give us a point-by-point elaboration of how we have actually militated against Hindus in the name of being secular, as if the onus only lies on Hindus to maintain the secular architecture of this state, which is such a folly. So you have seen many interventions on the Hindu side and allowances made for our minorities in the name of upholding secularism. But what we actually gifted ourselves was a minorityism. And I am not in any way against minorities having an association with the Indian state that protects their cultural identity. Please, by all means have it. But the state must be above, if it calls itself a secular state, must be above religion for everyone. You can't have the state intervening and codifying Hindu personal law, etc., stopping Hindus from a fundamental right which is going up and challenging a particular order which they don't like. I mean, if all of you were denied the right, for example, to approach court, how would you like it? I'm asking you. Raise your hand. Would you like it? Yes, no. Why? Because it's an assault on your right to seek some sort of redressal. Can you imagine a society where no one was allowed to seek redressal? And that is a policy. So we are told that, oh, the Modi government has injected so much communalism via policies. Name me one policy that is communal. But I can name you at least 20 that have been militantly communal policies brought in by other governments which were headed by either the Congress or their allies in power. So my thesis really is about breaking down this notion that we are becoming a narrow Hindu Pakistan. And I have elaborated on this across 10 chapters, Abbas.
Anand ji, is your view about the same thing, that we see that the Pran Pratishtha of Ram Lala is going to happen, and I'm certainly sure that Modi is going to make a big comeback. But your book, when put into this context and the perspective what we see for the future, how do you look at it? Because the pages, just those 120 pages, really will make one feel that, even if Modi is going to come back, maybe the things are not going to be back at the right place.
On the topic, first of all, I think the only thing more disturbing than being related to Rahul Gandhi is being related to Romila Thapar. But his name is also Rahul. Even that, I can... No, but Rahul has written an amazing book. It's most perceptive. And for anyone, even with a passing interest in what future holds for this country post 2024, and I say post 2024 because Abbas has already, and The Economist has conceded that Modi is going to win the next term. So what the future holds, who is going to be the Prime Minister after Narendra Modi, and how many times, and what next, I think it's very perceptive. So thank you for writing that.
Thank you so much,
yes.
Doctor.
Now I come to the question that Abbas asked. That my book, it's 120 odd pages, but I doubt if many of those things in there are going to be settled very soon. I think, let's be very honest, Modi's government is not anti-Hindu like the Congress blatantly has been. I've given examples in there. But it's not pro-Hindu as well. Just the other day, in fact, in Rahul Studios, there's some startling revelations that came out through Vishnu Jain, a good friend who's he and his father are fighting this incredible battle for our civilization. And he said that the district magistrate who opened the first time the gates of the Ram Lalla, he was not promoted because Mulayam Singh said he is a very honest judge, but because he did what he did, opened the gates, I'm not going to promote him. This has what has been happening. Mulayam Singh said, in order to save Muslims and their faith and the Babri Masjid, I ordered the firing at Ram Sevaks. And he said, even if not just 16, 30 had been killed, I would have stuck to my decision. Well, not just 30, but according to Hari Jain ji, 343 Ram Sevaks, Kar Sevaks were killed. And Vishnu filed an FIR against Mulayam Singh Yadav that wasn't accepted. So many things that have happened. And Vishnu said the system did nothing. Well, that's not true because the system under Mr. Modi gave him Padma Vibhushan. So yes, the government works in mysterious ways. It's not just about, and I think here, if I can make one small distinction, whatever I have discussed in this book is almost, the title itself is like a play, a parodic title on what the left feels we are living in right now, which is a Hindu Rashtra. You know, before 2014, everything was absolutely perfect, and suddenly, after that, we are living in a fascist Hindu Rashtra, Hindutvavadi, everything. And the idea was to tell that, look, these are the things, blatantly state-sanctioned anti-Hindu things that are happening in Hindu Rashtra. You know, how is this, how are the two things compatible? And the thing about Modi being not doing these things for Hindus, or I sincerely don't think these things as done for the Hindu cause. They are not Hindu things. If you remove discrimination that is state-sanctioned happening against a particular community, then it is, period, a discrimination. It is not discrimination against Hindus or against Muslims or against Christians or Sikhs or anybody else. So if, for example, just to give you one example, if 7 lakh Kashmiri Hindu refugees have not been returned to their land for 34 years, then it's not a Hindu thing. It's something for us to be ashamed of. So where is this something working if tomorrow the Prime Minister says, well, you know, we will make settlements there and we will make sure that every Kashmiri Hindu who's been displaced, exiled, and Rahul belongs to one from that community, is returned to their land. It's not for the cause of Hindus, it's for the just cause of Indians. So none of these things are, and yesterday was the 34th anniversary of the Kashmiri Hindu genocide that happened on 19 January 1990, where they were raped, pillaged, looted, ethnically cleansed, driven out. We can settle 40 to 50,000 Rohingya Muslims in Kashmir and rest of India. And we have not been able to settle 7 lakh of our own people. Be that as it may, the fact also remains that it's not just Modi that is, quote unquote, not working for Indian interests. I'm no longer going to call it Hindu interests, Avas. It's the Supreme Court as well. Because in October of 2020, the Supreme, and again repeated it refused to reopen the cases of Kashmiri Hindu genocide of 1990, saying too much time had elapsed. What can be more cruel than that? I've just, thanks to J. Sai Deepak, won a wonderful case against criminal, what is it called? Contempt of court. So I'm feeling a little bit freer now, I can say this. What the Supreme Court did was absolutely criminal, horrific. Especially 6 months after it said it's not going to reopen the cases against Kashmiri Hindus, that crimes against, it said it set up an SIT to look into and reopen the cases of atrocities against the Sikhs in the 1984 genocide that happened 7 years before 1990. So that it can reopen. But 1990 it says too much time had elapsed. This is what is happening. in Hindu Rashtra. So it's not something to do with Hindus at all. It's basic human decency and rights that Hindus are not being provided. Finally, just before I end at least this chapter of it, you may think that it is the Hindus that have been stomped upon with this draconian evil Places of Worship Act. But it's not just the Hindus. It's a human being, because what else is democracy? The first preamble of democracy should be that a man should be able to approach the courts to seek justice. It doesn't matter if the judge adjudicates against him or for him, but at least he should be allowed to seek to approach the courts. And Hindus have been barred from doing that. Other than Ram Janam Bhoomi, any other place that has been demolished, that is sacrosanct and sacred to the Hindus, Kashi, Mathura and so many others, the Hindus can't even approach the court to say, my lord, can you please at least give us back the demolished temple, the most sacred temple, or can you please at least adjudicate whether this rightfully belongs now to us or not? Can you please adjudicate for us or against us? Hindus can't even do that. How is this a democracy? I'm sorry, it's not. As I say, we have been a banana republic ever since we became a republic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anand. Now, because we use the term Hindu Rashtra, and also Rahul books also deals a lot with the issues about Hindu Rashtra. He talks about Hindu Rajya. He makes a very necessary distinction which should be there. But when we look at a wholesome idea that whether it was a Hindu Rashtra or Hindu Rajya way back in 8th century when the Persians were being persecuted and they got a place under a Hindu king, and of course he must be having a Hindu Rajya apart from it being a Hindu Rashtra, whatsoever we may like to call it, then we also gave to the place to the people who were persecuting, because the story of India is quite different. The northern belt was about invasions, while in the south the Arabs were entering through the trade. So we give the place to them as well. Now still, having seen that history, still this paranoia of the Hindu Rashtra is perpetrated among the people. It's said that Hindu Rashtra Modi aayega to fir se Hindu Rashtra aa jayega, or in fact it will be Hindu Pakistan and whatsoever. So what exactly is the reason that they keep on harping on it like a broken record? It never stops, though the things are well known.
So when we had monarchies, we were more open. Today we have democracy. And as Dr. Ranganathan was saying, Hindus don't get justice in your own country. I tweeted today, and I'm sure a lot of you, and it's very worthy, you must all stand up for human rights and the right to return. You know, there's this word, right to return. Where have you heard it? Where have you heard it? With respect to the Palestinians, right? They have a right to return. How many of you have held up one of these placards to say, Hindus have a right to return to Kashmir? How many? I'm told that, you see, most campuses are full of leftists, and they were all out when the Israel conflict was happening after the terror attack on Israel, as if they didn't have a right to self-defense. And I was told that a large number of people here were holding up placards, and I saw them from my studio, of course, saying, Palestinians have a right to return, right to return, right to... Of course, everyone has a legitimate right to return. But the point is, here in our country, where we have democracy, forget about a Hindu Rajya, a monarch, a Hindu king. We have democracy today, right? We don't have a right to return for our own Hindus, and you're talking about a Hindu Rashtra and they're talking about a Hindu Pakistan. Can you believe it, viewers? Let me tell you something. That we have had Hindu Rajya, and I've sort of dedicated a couple of chapters to this, where the only time we've been a theocratic state, the only time, was under Ashoka, who said that his personal religion will apply to all the citizens. But even then, there was no externing of people from Hindu, Jain, and other faiths. Today, Abbas is saying that, we gave shelter to Persians, all of that. Yes, of course it's true. And there were Hindu kings who did so. Today, as a democracy, we don't give shelter to our own Hindus. So you see the dichotomy here? We had a problem giving justice to Sikhs. A democracy. That's because a deliberate attempt was made to cut us off in 1952 via our constitution from our Hindu dharma, which at the essence is a tolerant dharma. You had people like Jawaharlal Nehru who wanted to talk about modernism, break away from your Hindu past. They were not breaking away from any other past. They wanted to break away from this very sort of, superstitious, backward thinking Hindu thought. In fact, they even came up with a phrase when Mr. Nehru's economic policies failed, and they called it the Hindu rate of growth. As if only the Hindus and their way of doing work and business was responsible for our economic situation. Mr. Nehru was absolved. It was you made to feel bad about your own selves constantly and about your religion, your faith, your outlook. And the reason why, had we not militated against our own dharma, had we accepted it and embraced it, we would not have had these perversions that we're having today. And that's the fundamental problem. We adopted democracy with a completely Western view, forgetting that our own traditions equip us to deal beautifully with multiculturalism. That's fundamentally what the issue is.
Yeah, and if we delve further into the again, I'm going back to the thing that yes, the Pran Pratishtha is going to happen in 2 days, and it's for me it's a very important moment because we are trying to get back something which has got a geopolitical impact. I say that because in the past only one such act had happened. It was Reconquista. You can Google about Reconquista and know about what the history of Spain, and they got back all the churches, and mosques were again made into the churches. Back there, after that, we have never been able to do something like that. So it's a very important instance. And now, but when we start looking back to the symbolism, there are a lot of symbolic things which Modi is doing, and symbolism play a very vital role in any person's life. Now, the kind of tweets or the kind of appreciation at times Mr. Modi passes on to a lot of people, say that whether it's Xavier or at times it may be about the Sufis. So it also it merges in a very wrong way with how the history actually exists, and the people who are working on the history, when they come up to know that this is what is happening, they see a very dark face looking at them. So what do you have to say about it? Because you also are very active to write to Modi back that this is something which needs to stop, because Xavier certainly was no better than Aurangzeb.
No, absolutely, and I think I'm of course sympathetic to voices that rise from the ground, voices from all of us, each one of us, and hoping that they may climb up, taking their time and reach the upper echelons so that action may be taken. But we can only do so much, write books and talk about things. The real action, I believe, happens from top down. And that it's not happening. It's completely absent. In fact, it's the other way around. At least now, you expect people to know about the tragedy that was our history, and not repeat and eulogize the same mistakes that others you have been calling ignorant have been making. Case in point was St. Francis Xavier and our Prime Minister Narendra Modi eulogizing him, and the festival that happens in his honor. I mean, he wasn't here to foresee or to oversee the Goan Inquisition, but he was an architect of that. And the kind of things he said about Hindus and Hindu idols and everything was just absolutely appalling. And he's being venerated. You have, the Sufi saint Chishti being venerated just now. चादर चढ़ाई Prime Minister ने. So उसका पता तो लगाएं उन्होंने बोला क्या क्या. उन्होंने कहा my holy duty is to convert the infidels, to break Hindu temples. He was the one who collaborated and got Prithviraj Chauhan into the situation that he did. These are the people when our Hindu Hriday Samrat is eulogizing. बाकी की तो बात ही कुछ और है. बाकी की बात क्या करनी. जैसे Rahul talked about consecration and what happened in Somnath in 1951. You see, the fact of the matter is that when Nehru said he implored the president not to go and inaugurate it, fearing Hindu revivalism, and president thankfully ignored him. But the fact of the matter is that has been ingrained in us. We don't expect that kind of ignorance to have lasted for the last 9 years. We simply don't, because yes, Aurangzeb, at least that road was renamed, but the lane existed till just 4 months ago. And to talk of consecration and Nehru not going there, the Congress not going to the consecration that's going to happen in a couple of days' time. See, it's all very well. I mean, I'm not one of those that, politicians should not do or say anything, as some things are like, kosher, some things are not. You say or do whatever you want to say or do. But the fact of the matter is, आपको कुछ चीज free नहीं मिलती, छीननी पड़ती है. Now, who was stopping the Congress from celebrating this Pran Pratishtha as much, if not more, than the BJP? Nobody. In fact, they could have given it back and made BJP worry with their enthusiasm for the Ram temple consecration, but they didn't. They went the other way. They're not going there. You look at Kejriwal, for example, who I call Chota Modi. हर जगह वो सुंदरकांड के पाठ करवा रहा है. उसको पता है कि this is the national mood. I'm just talking very politically out here, so I'm being cynical out here. He knows that this is the sentiment of 1.4 billion people, and I say 1.4 billion, not 1 billion Hindus. This is the sentiment of every Indian, because the 250 odd or 300 million odd Muslims, their Hindu ancestors also fought to correct the historical injustices. Yes, they might be Muslims now, but all of us come from the same pool of the ancestors who were wronged, and that wrong is being corrected now. So Congress not going here, but in 1959, Nehru visited the tomb or the grave of Babur. In 1976, Indira Gandhi visited the grave of Babur. In 1986, Rajiv Gandhi visited. In 2005, Rahul Gandhi visited. बाबर की ग्रेव पे विजिट करेंगे, लेकिन राम टेम्पल के लिए नहीं जाएंगे. And this is what Babar said, and I quote him. And the person sitting next to me has just written a most authoritative book on Babar. Quote, "For the sake of Islam, I became a wanderer. I battled infidels and Hindus. I was determined to become a martyr. Thanks be to Allah, I became a Ghazi." This is the words of Babar from Babarnama. तो ऐसा भी नहीं है कि किसी और ने कोट कर दिया, वायर क्विंट वगैरह नहीं, ये बाबर ने खुद ही लिखा है. When you go and visit the tomb or the grave of such a man who said, "I will bring untold destruction onto infidels, I'm a Ghazi," and you don't go and take part in the consecration of what is the dawn of a new chapter of our civilization that was wronged, that is being corrected. It shows who you are as a person, not as a politician, but it shows who you are as a person. And that hasn't changed, unfortunately.
Yeah, so and Babar certainly saw himself in the line of Ghazni and Gori, and he quotes said that I am the third in the line of Tramontana invaders, jihadi invaders to be precise. This is what he uses. And Tramontana are the people who come from the hilly regions. He says the first one is a Ghazni, second is a Gori, and third is myself. And I'm gonna fulfill the dream of Amir Taimur. So he is very clear about it.
Taimur, the same.
Taimur.
अभी किसी ने नाम भी रखा है ना तैमूर अपने.
Yes.
Is there a Hitler road in Tel Aviv?
So, and this whole brigade of people also make a point that if Modi would come or anytime BJP makes a comeback, they will saffronize the education and history. which eventually has not at all happened. Not even a tinge of saffronization, which has been there.
They've made it more greener.
Yeah, they did to some extent, and but the point was clear that if government is not doing, we should keep at least writing something, and people are doing the job. But they always bring this fear that they are gonna distort the history. So what kind of distortion are they talking about in the name of saffronization? Whether, I don't know how many of you are aware that Akbar had a very particular rule that if a woman or a girl walks into the public without the veil, she will be made into a prostitute. And this is being written by Badoni, authority or the court historian of Akbar himself. And we shower a lot of praises to Akbar. Now, a question to you, Rahul, is that what's the fear they have about the history that suddenly कुछ भी बदल जाएगा? The moment even a government says कि थोड़ा हम एक दो comma हिला देंगे, I'm just being metaphorical here, then the whole brigade is up there in arms that history will be distorted.
See, history was already distorted. And in my book, let me just read you a little passage. Could be interesting for some of our friends here. The classroom is perhaps the only setting where this could have been done without fear of politics or dogma adulterating the message. Instead, the Indian state immediately after independence adopted a policy of secularizing history. What I mean is, they forgot to tell us about all the horrible, what should one call them? Impositions, to use a polite word, on Hindus. And so evolved a sanitized version of history that romanticized interfaith relations of the past without acknowledging the existence of a collective memory that believed in a different truth. This happened with me personally. As a person who lost my Kashmiri roots, which were severed, I found that there was no reference, in fact. In fact, I was told through a lot of academic literature that Kashmiri Hindus deserved it. They deserved to be butchered. You know why? Because they happened to be educated, hardworking, honest, and controlled the levers of business. And therefore, they need to be. That is straight, hardcore Trotskyism, Stalinism, Leninism. And we were told that is, you deserved it, guys. You should have spread your wealth all around and been very open and nice to other people, which we were.
Sorry to interrupt, but there was, in fact, a journalist who insinuated this.
Well, journalists, you see, have this awful habit of reading stuff without finding out and inquiring if the facts are true. So, some journalists just quote chapter and verse from what they are told and the people they hang out with. So I think that's what really happened there. Doc, I don't think that was an assessment on the journalist part. I think that was a fed bit of you know what. Anyhow, so sample this report of the University Education Commission led by Constituent Assembly member Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan in 1948 regarding the aims of spread of university education in India under the section titled The Spread of Islam. Listen to this. From very ancient times, India had intimate relations with the Arabs, especially in commerce and trade. There were land and sea routes established between two countries. The Muslims were welcomed in India by Hindu rulers who permitted them to build mosques and spread their teachings. Indian culture did not believe in compelling people to choose its way of life. It encouraged each group that found its home in India to live by its own conception of the good life. So basically going around bashing up Hindus, demolishing their temples was the good life, you see. And I continue. With the advent of Mughals, the imperial court became the meeting ground of Hindu and Muslim scholars who made themselves familiar with each other's cultures. So the king who was thinking of becoming a Ghazi, his court was a lovely place where Hindus and Muslims were kissing up to each other. Now let me continue. In the 11th century, the great Muslim scholar Al-Biruni mastered the Sanskrit language and left us impressive and critical accounts of the achievements of the Hindus in sciences and philosophy. India's spirit of comprehension and forbearance influenced the Mughals and the cultural activities of India between the 14th and 19th centuries illustrate Hindu-Muslim collaboration. In science and literature, music, architecture, and painting and dancing, there was notable synthesis of Hindu and Muslim ideas. Over 2 decades later, the Committee on School Textbooks of the Government of India in 1969 continued with the project of secularizing history, while paying lip service to the idea that there can be no compromise with truth. The committee went on to recommend, now this is where it gets really, really insidious. In view of the fact in teaching Indian history in the past during British rule, stress has often been laid on religious differences and conflicts. It is necessary that we should now highlight those situations. And they are legion where people of all religious faiths have worked together in unity and cooperation, where certain facts of history are important in themselves and cannot and indeed should not be ignored. They should be used widely to show how ugly these episodes of the past are and things of which all of us should be ashamed, and everything should be done to avoid them in the future. This would obviously involve a creative and purposeful reinterpretation of history and judicious selection of historical truths. So you cherry pick those truths to say, "Arey yahan to sab bhaichara tha." The interests of national unity and the needs of a modernizing society should be the primary consideration in our choice and presentation of material. You know what this amounts to? It amounts to teaching young Jewish children in Israel that there was nothing called a Holocaust. Because you see, we need to create bhaichara, a true secularism. That's what it amounts to. I hope you understand. If you start addressing this problem, imagine the lies that will emerge if you start looking into the history that you are being taught and I was taught. That's why there's a problem with rewriting. This is not rewriting history. This is correcting history. Let me tell you this.
Yeah. And if I can just add to that, Abbas. No, absolutely perceptive comments, Rahul. But, again, I say that, yes, before 2014, you could fault legitimately the Congress government. They had an agenda to actually rewrite history or to hide things. But why should one keep on blaming the Congress government for the last 9 years? I mean, they're not in power. One would be a coward if one doesn't blame without malice or is not critical about the people who are in power who have the ability to change. And, Rahul talked about Emperor Ashoka. I'm still looking for the guy who wrote the textbook that I had to read in college. Mil jaye to, he said Emperor Ashoka, undertook this great Kalinga war and lakhs were killed, and he saw that death and destruction and he converted to Buddhism. And your icon, the ex-SRCCN, I think he's in the crowd, Sanjeev Sanyal, I read his book. And there it says that Ashoka was already a Buddhist 4 to 8 years before he undertook the Kalinga war. Ye padhaya gaya hame. And is it surprising anymore that, the closest railway station to Nalanda is named after the guy who burned Nalanda, Bakhtiyarpur. And Congress, BJP, yes, you can imagine Congress would never change that name, but BJP has been in a coalition government in Bihar. They could have done it. They haven't changed the name. They didn't. And now they're not, but you never know about Nitish Kumar. They again might come in coalition with, NDA. And the same thing goes for Aurangabad. The BJP, led this mission that Aurangabad, the name should be changed to Sambhaji. They were in power for 5 years under Fadnavis. They never did it. The last day of the Mahavikas Aghadi, the decision on the last day of that government was by Uddhav Thackeray to change the name of Aurangabad to Sambhajinagar. So BJP didn't do it. BJP talks about all these issues, लेकिन करते नहीं है. करते वो हैं जो कांग्रेस प्रॉमिस करती है, लेकिन फिर उसके बाद वहाँ पे भी गड़बड़ हो जाती है, फार्म लॉज एंड सीए एंड व्हाट नॉट. बट स्टिकिंग टू हिस्ट्री, यू हैव कांग्रेस गवर्नमेंट्स नाउ अगेन दे हैव रीस्टार्टेड सेलिब्रेटिंग टीपू जयंती. अरे टीपू का खुद अपना मैनिफेस्टो पढ़ लो जो उसने लिखा है.
What the manifesto is dreams. If you read his dreams,
right,
you will find that he is sitting on the pot and he's saying that I want to Islamize whole of the world. So
That's a very disturbing image.
yeah.
But, just to quote one of his own, sentences, annihilation of the infidel is my sacred duty. You're celebrating his festival. The man butchered Hindus, Christians. Even dead Hindus were taken out from and converted in Coorg. And you're celebrating this person. So, as I say, nations weaken not because of their past, but because of how they are taught it. And we continue to be taught that these people are to be eulogized. And I won't even go into Nehru because that will be the topic of another discussion.
There's one good point that I think we should make, which is the fact that even when you want to change names, there is a massive backlash. And a large number of you also say, "Arey yaar, chodo yaar, Gurugram ko, yaar, Gurgaon, kya yaar ye sarkar?" So we also have to look at it and be more accommodative, because obviously governments are reacting to what a lot of people are also thinking. Now, let me give you a small example of this and just think it through at one level. You have a situation where the same people who are talking about this, rewriting this, that, they stood with the Black Lives Matter movement in America. And what were they doing? Very rightly so. Confederate statues should be brought down, or so and so forth. These people should be banished, their roads, their names, whatever should be changed. When we look at our own Confederates, those people who butchered, murdered, killed, etc., unke naam mat bata. So, think about it. And a large number of you people will say, "Arey yaar, chodo yaar, kuch aur karo na. Bring down the price of petrol." But if you're not going to have an identity left, देश कहाँ बचेगा, economy कहाँ होगी? Think about that.
I like to touch upon one very important thing, that when Babri was brought down, the way it happened, and of course none of us subscribe to the idea that violence should happen or demolition should come through. None of us believe in that. But if we retrospect it a bit, and in the context of when further the Places of Worship Act came, and which also further tells you that what was the mood of the state and how the mood of the state has always been. Had Babri not been brought down, the things would have been possible, because the period when even the Kursevaks to some extent were being seen as the villains by a large section of people who would be some elite educated class and many others among the group. Even now, many of them have come back to realize that they had done something phenomenal. So where do we look at it, and how can we link it with Places of Worship Act, and how do we see the future of temples in that perspective?
Okay, so I get a lot of flack for this, especially my friends on the right, the so-called right. They leave no stone unturned to attack me, because whenever they're angry at whatever I say, jo unko अच्छा नहीं लगता, they bring this statement of mine that I made in 2016 or 17. But they don't realize that I have not spared a single opportunity of repeating that statement, because I'm proud of it and I'm going to repeat it now. गालियाँ पढ़ेंगे तो पढ़ने दीजिए. So what I said was that if I was the Prime Minister, P.V. Narasimha Rao, thank God I'm not, but if I was, I would have rebuilt the Babri Masjid brick by brick till such time that the Supreme Court adjudicated it. अब इस पे मुझे बहुत पड़ता है कि देखो ये brick by brick बनाने वाला था और ये आज ये राम के गुण गा रहा है. Well, I am proud of what I said, because breaking the Babri Masjid is what the jihadists and the leftists do illegally. They do not adhere to the law of the land. And I am proud that 1 billion my Hindu brothers and sisters, left it to 5 people to adjudicate on the most sacrosanct of places of theirs. किसी और रिलीजन में, किसी और कंट्री में ये होगा कि 1 बिलियन लोगों ने 5 लोगों पे छोड़ दिया कि आप बताएं ये हमें जगह मिलनी चाहिए कि नहीं मिलनी चाहिए. That is what law-abiding person is, and I am proud of my 1 billion Hindu brothers and sisters. And that is why I repeat it, because people must understand that it is the Hindus who have waited. And it was wrong what many did by taking law in their own hand, because that is what Islamists do, that is what leftists do, and they're doing around the world. You saw how King Leopold's statue was brought down illegally because of what evils he perpetrated in Congo. The left celebrated it. You've seen how left celebrates bringing down the statues of Cecil Rhodes or Confederacy generals, or even Churchill vandalizing his statue, because the left doesn't believe in the law of the land. It says this should be done, so let's celebrate it. But when it comes to Hindus, the same left says no, you must not take law in your own hands. But I, as a civilizational Hindu, say no, that was wrong what happened, because this is what the Hindus are. And it's not just the Ram Janam Bhoomi. It's not just that the Nandi has been waiting patiently for 500 years to see his Lord. It's not just that the broken idols of baby Krishna that are buried under the steps of Jahanara Mosque and millions of feet over the last 500 years have trodden upon them as the feet go to offer namaz. It's not that those broken idols of Krishna, the waiting Nandi, is going to, and Hindus are going to take law in their own hands. Aren't Hindu waiting? Aren't those cases in the courts right now? And they are being prevented to even approach the justice. So this is what happens when you prevent a person from legitimately even approaching the court. He takes law in the own hands, but then ultimately who is responsible? You have to ask these questions.
So also you have in your book you have touched certain idea about secularism and how it was always there in India to some extent, with a different kind of definition of secularism what you have given. I try to define it in a different way. So, but given the fact that the temples are in control of the government, because by the basic definition of secularism, the state has no business with the religion and vice versa. It's a complete separation between the church and the state. Now, I see that in the time to come also, perhaps the temples are not gonna get out of the government control so easily. So, will it really be appropriate to see the country as a state as a secular one, or it's really not?
3 points. Abbas, we were never a secular country. Let me be very clear about this. There was a massive debate that took place in the Constituent Assembly about putting the word secular into our preamble. As you know, that came much later. It came during the emergency. Why? Because Hindu Dharma believes in a fundamental concept that all of us have a right to exist peacefully with each other. We are secular by nature because Hindus are secular. India is secular because Hindus are secular. It is not the other way around. It's the other way around in England. It's the other way around in Britain, in the United States. And mostly in France. So had you put the word secular and become a French kind of republic, Nehru would not have been able to, and his governments and successive governments would not have been able to control temples, change Hindu personal law and leave aside other people's personal laws, to make several interventions by giving Hajj subsidies, creating minority affairs ministries as the Congress did later on in the 70s and the 90s, and promise a majority share of the state's resources to one community, the Muslim community, as Dr. Manmohan Singh said in 2007. We put the word secularism in the 70s, in 77. Were we not secular before that? As a people. In fact, at that time when that word was being injected, it's a completely westernized word, one individual called L.M. Singhvi turned to Indira Gandhi ji and said, Dekho, we are a dharmic people. We are a dharmic civilization. We can be Panth Nirpeksh, but we can never be Dharm Nirpeksh. All our buildings, from the Supreme Court to the Parliament, have quotations which guide their philosophies. Our army jawans wear them on their epaulets. Beautiful words borrowed from where? From our Hindu Dharma. Dharma is not religion. This is the biggest confusion. It's the biggest confusion. Dharma is only a bunch of principles that you should follow. Even the kings were inferior to Dharma. They had to bow. And there's a little place in this book where I actually talk about it. I don't know if I'll be able to find that at short notice. We've never been secular because we were never allowed to be secular, because the form of secularism we adopted was not secularism. That's where the problem begins and ends. And even by putting that word in, nothing changed.
Do I get 30 seconds?
For sure, you always have this right.
No. I just wanted to end by, Rahul, what wonderful, things he said. But, when he talked about how we have gleaned from Dharma various quotations that decorate our great institutions hallowed all around. You people, us, but in many ways the future generation, are the keepers of the flame of this, our glorious civilization. Don't think of it as a Hindu or a Muslim or anybody. It is our civilization. I'll give you one example, the greatness of it. On the eve of the great battle of Mahabharata, Duryodhan goes up to Gandhari and says, "Oh mother, support us. Stand with us. You are our mother. You are our blood. And we will win if you stand with us." And you know what Gandhari says? Yato dharmastato jaya. Where there is dharma, there is victory. If you are righteous, you will win. This is our civilization. Even the mother is not prepared to stand with the son, her own blood, if that son is not righteous. And this Yato dharmastato jaya is the inscription on our Supreme Court.
So just 30 seconds, I beg your indulgence. Hindu Dharma is the reason why even Rohingyas want to come to this country. Muslims want to come to this country from Afghanistan. And given a chance, they'd even come from Palestine.
Good morning, Rahul sir, Abhas sir and Anand sir. It is always a pleasure to listen to you all, especially Anand sir. My question is to you, sir. Isn't the definition of minority as we understand in India a misnomer? The so-called minorities are world majorities. Does not it amount to hoodwinking the common people? And I'm talking about the two principal quote-unquote minorities.
No, absolutely. And I believe in humanity. I don't believe in minority, majority. And I don't believe in this divine right given by the Constitution to our people who govern us, that minorities will have the first right to resources. In fact, that will in the long run go against them. It will turn people against them. And that is what was happening, because Congress was about to bring a communal violence bill where, irrespective of wherever a communal riot happened, the Hindus would be held responsible. The majority would. So in Kashmir, where 98.4% population in the valley is Muslim, if a riot happened, the Hindus would be caught. Thankfully, the bill was not passed and it was not enacted, but this is the state to which, the state is prepared to bend, knee crawl. So this is totally unacceptable to me.
My question is to Anand sir. Sir, आपका जो 2016 का स्टेटमेंट था कि यू आर प्राउड ऑफ हिंदूज अबाइडिंग लॉज और मैं बाबरी मस्जिद वापस बनाता, सर क्या आपको लगता है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट कभी ऐसा डिसीजन दे सकता है कि एक एग्जिस्टिंग रिलीजियस साइट को डेमोलिश करके फिर कोई और बनाया जाए, जो हम काशी मथुरा में देख रहे हैं? डू यू एवर थिंक कि कभी कोई ऐसा डिसीजन आ सकता है? वो कार सेवा हुई जब तोड़ा गया तभी शायद वो डिसीजन आया, नहीं तो अभी हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट कभी ये कहे कि जो मथुरा में एग्जिस्टिंग मॉस्क है या जो काशी में मॉस्क है उसको तोड़ो फिर वहाँ पे बनाओ. आई डोंट थिंक कभी सुप्रीम कोर्ट वो दे पाता अगर कार सेवा नहीं होती.
At the risk of getting another contempt of court slapped against me, I think the judges, I would say in their defense, possibly read a lot of history. And they would realize that during the making of the Aswan Dam, a lot of Egyptian civilization, ancient structures were displaced. तो तोड़ के ही solution नहीं है. You can displace huge monuments and you can just Google and find out in Ireland, in America, in fact in Germany, whole churches have been displaced.
But can I just say something? Yeah. That was not a mosque. Now you'll say, "Arey, ye kya keh raha hai?" How can you build a mosque? Have you anyone acquaint yourself with a little bit of Islamic theology? A waqf can only be formed on a place that is not desecrated. जहां आपने किसी और का धर्म का कुछ तोड़ फोड़ के बनाया है, वो मॉस्क नहीं कहलाया जाता. ये तो हमारे बताया जाता है कि वो मॉस्क. And the Supreme Court said that was not a mosque. That was not a place where continuous puja was prayers were being offered. So it was not a masjid. It was something that was made to only symbolically tell others that we have captured your Vatican, your Mecca, the birthplace of Ram.
But you must also realize that almost every land you see walk around is possibly Waqf land. In fact, jokingly, I remember with Rahul, we were in the studio and I jokingly said, Rahul, please find out if Times Now studio is on Waqf land. वो Waqf land पे निकला.
Thank you so much, sir. And my question is for Anand, sir. So, sir, recently we saw a rampant amount of statements being made by a party, DMK, by the members of DMK. So, for example, Udayanidhi Stalin, he compared Sanatan to dengue, and then A. Raja goes on with AIDS virus and etc. and etc. And like you have rightly pointed out in your book as well, that almost 12,000 mandirs in Tamil Nadu do not have even one time of payment so as to carry out their worships. So, how exactly do you see the faith of South India, this injection of Dravidianism being injected into the people of South India? How do you see the faith of Sanatan Dharam in the southern part of our country, sir?
Well, to use one word, eternal. The same guy who attended the conference, the endowment minister, who attended the conference that said eradicate Sanatan Dharma, just 3 days ago was giving Ramcharitmanas to the chief minister. These people come and go. They are like flies in the, or dust, sand. They are irrelevant. What matters is the faith of the people of Tamil Nadu, what they have, the beauty of the temples, who constructed it. And it's just, as I said, eternal, it's going to go on. Aurangzeb ne mita paya, to ye Stalin mitayega.
Greetings, sir. My question is to all of you. I am noticing a pattern here, and with all of your leanings, that वॉटअबाउटरी हो रही है. कहा जा रहा है कि कोई और कंट्री होगी जिसमें ऐसा होता होगा. मतलब my question is कि are we so degenerate that we'll compare ourselves to Akbar, Babur, Aurangzeb, or anybody else who's done away with desecration of mosques, temples, or religious suppression? Are we so degenerate to go back to those times and not look at what is happening right now? अगर मान लीजिए मैं अपने घर के सामने पूरा कूड़ा फैला दूं और कहूं कि हर घर से थोड़ा थोड़ा कूड़ा मतलब निकलता है, तो ये किस टाइप का आर्गुमेंट हुआ?
Sorry, what's your question? Can you give an example of what you believe should not be done?
Yes, sir.
So Ram temple should not be built? Is that what you're saying?
No, sir, that's not my argument.
Yeah.
The argument is...
Where does whataboutery come in? I didn't understand.
Whataboutery is coming, for example, आपने कहा demolition of temples हो रहा है, मतलब हो चुका है, और the Mughal rule or the Islamic rule which you refer to as, उसमें demolition of temples हुआ है. But आप उसको तो कंसिडर नहीं कर रहे हैं ना कि जो 10th century में राष्ट्रकूटा किंग इंदिरा 3 ने जो डिस्ट्रॉय किए थे टेम्पल्स, कलाप्रिया टेम्पल जिसका एक एग्जांपल है. तो
Okay, so now let me qualify my answer in 2 parts. The second part I will leave it to Abhas because he's going to answer that. But the first one, and I've said this before, this is not a Hindu issue. And I've said it publicly. If a Muslim were to bring evidence to me that his or her mosque was demolished by a Hindu king and a temple built over it, I will go with him to the Supreme Court to demand justice so that the historical injustice is wrong. It is people like you, I'm not just saying you, but all the leftists, including you. They are the ones who bring in Hindu-Muslim issue. I said it at the start as well. This is an Indian civilizational issue. Nothing to do with, if tomorrow a Buddhist were to say that a Buddhist shrine was demolished by a Hindu king, I want it back, I will go with him to the court. Why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I? And finally, whataboutery is a legitimate tool to expose hypocrisy. The first time in my reading that it was used was by none other than Dr. Ambedkar. I'll give you an example. When Catherine Mayo wrote her horrible book about Hindu ill practices, and Mahatma Gandhi, quote unquote, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, he said this was a drain inspector's report. Ambedkar said of that book, reading that book, one may come under the impression that all the ills of the society, all the ills of the religion are secluded, are reserved only for the Hindus. Nothing can be further from the truth. Islam and Muslims have more ills, if not the same as Hindus. Now you could be saying, isn't Ambedkar saying Hinduism ka, what about Islam? Right? Whataboutery is a legitimate tool to expose hypocrites.
So I will just address that part because I know where you are coming from, and this is going on since 1970s. So you should remember three names for sure. One of them is Sitaram Goyal, second is Romila Thapar, and third is Irfan Habib. So why I'm taking these three names? Because these three names come very much in context. So it was in 90s when two very famous books came up. What happened to the Hindu temples? It was written by Sitaram Goyal, Ram Swaroop, Arun Shourie, and one more person. So there are four people who wrote the first book, where they documented that which are the temples which are demolished, and there was some list of 2,000. A number comes up that 40,000. We also don't know that what is source of it. That can be whataboutery, but 2,000 he has certainly recorded. Now, when he brought that book, a letter was written by Professor Thapar and three more eminent historians in Times of India. That letter was alleging that, the temples have been destroyed, that's fine, but what about the Buddhist and the Jain places which have been destroyed as well? So there was certain kind of allegations which was made on Sitaram Goyal. Sitaram Goyal took a courtesy look at it. He replied back to Romila Thapar, and there were three exchanges which happened. In the third exchange, also Professor Thapar was not agreeing to what S.R. Goyal is saying. Then S.R. Goyal posed 8 questions to Romila Thapar, and those 8 questions were, of which one of them was that when I'm talking about the destruction of Hindu temples done by the Islamic invaders, I am giving the theological base to it. I am giving inscription. I am giving historical records by the Muslim historians themselves. Now, and there were some 8 frame of questions which were made, and he said that if at all you find that any Buddhist or Jain places have been demolished that way, I will be the party to it to support you, like how Dr. Anand said right now. After that, Romila Thapar went complete silent. S.R. Goyal is gone. That has not ever been answered. I'll pick 2 cases. One is about, say, the popular one, about the King Harsha of who is mentioned in by Kalhana. It is said that Harsha, the Hindu king, demolished certain Buddhist structures, but Kalhan mentions the Turk Harsha. He is mentioning Turk Harsha. Kalhan is not saying Harsha, the Hindu king. He is saying the Turk. And Turk are certainly the invaders, because he is working for the Muslim invaders, and that's how he demolished those structures. Again, the case of Pushwamitra Sangha is based on a document called Ashok Vadana. Ashok Vadana में आप selectively choose करते हो to blame Pushwamitra Sangha of demolishing 84,000 stupas. But the same Ashok Vadana also talks about killing of the Jains and Azvikas by the Ashoka and destructions of many other places. People get silent about Ashoka. So this kind of hypocrisy can't work. And of course, there are furthermore arguments which were given by Arun Shourie in his book Eminent Historians, where he has explained this phenomenon really well. And unfortunately, those rebuttals which was given back, they were never rebutted back. So if you want to discuss this as a whataboutery, you will have to go back to those serious research papers and the rebuttals written by the people like Shourie, S.R. Goyal. If you can rebut them, then we have a case, because still Professor Thapar has not been able to answer it.
One small thing. I think we should put our hands together for this young man. At least he's asked a question that has brought out an elaborate response, and I think it just tells us how alive democracy is in this country. So I think this is great that in a university you can have questions which go every which way.
No, absolutely, we need the left.
No, But on a serious note, I will seriously ask you to, because this is there, you should go back to those papers, check it, and time to wind up.